You're watching World News. I'm Miriam Zian, and these are your top stories. On the 14th day of the war, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard announced having carried out its most powerful attack on Israel since the start of the conflict. Tehran targeted U.S. aircraft in Iraqi airspace, and the U.S. defense affirms that Iran's military capabilities have declined based on a clear plan of destruction. Saudi air defenses announced the interception of dozens of drones in various parts of the country. Oman reported the killing of 2 people in a drone crash in the north of the Sultanate. And Turkey has stated that NATO defenses had intercepted a 3rd missile launched from Iran and demands explanation from Tehran. Iran holds the U.S. responsible for destabilizing the Strait of Hormuz and the whole region. The U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz is difficult, and the European Union requests the International Atomic Energy Agency to assess the impact of releasing millions of barrels of oil reserves. In Lebanon, martyrs and wounded have been reported in Israeli raids on southern towns. Hezbollah shells 2 settlements and vital sites inside the entity. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres arrives in Lebanon as part of a solidarity visit. Welcome back to the details of your nightly news. And first in our news, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it launched its strongest attack on the Zionist entity since the war began on February 28. According to Tasnim news agency, the strikes targeted multiple sites and marked the 46th wave of Operation True Promise 4, using heavy missiles such as Khurram Shahr, Khaybar Shikan, Imad, and Qadr. And Iran Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters said several Israeli U.S. sites and bases in the Middle East were targeted. Spokesman Ibrahim Solfagari said Iranian drones struck targets in Israeli-held territories and also targeted the United States 5th Fleet headquarters, Muwaffaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, U.S. bases in Manama, Bahrain, and Erbil in Kurdistan. He also claimed a U.S. refueling aircraft was hit and its crew killed. The Iranian army said it targeted what it described as Israeli Defense Forces positions in the Palestinian territories using drones. In a statement Friday, it said an explosive drone struck the command of the Israel Defense Forces in Beersheba. Hebrew media reported on Friday that dozens of settlers were injured by shrapnel from missiles fired from Iran. Reports said Iran launched several waves of missiles toward Israeli-held areas, with over 50 injuries reported in the Galilee in northern Israel due to falling missile fragments. The Iranian news agency reported that Israeli strikes targeted the cities of Kermanshah and Arak in western Iraq, or Iran. Officials in Iraq said the attack killed a woman and a child and injured dozens of civilians after hitting a residential complex. Strikes also targeted 2 production units in the city's industrial area without reported damage. The United States Central Command said all 6 crew members aboard a U.S. military aircraft that crashed in western Iraq on Thursday have died. Earlier, the United States Army reported 4 soldiers dead and 2 missing after the crash of a refueling aircraft, before later confirming their deaths. Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it targeted a U.S. aerial refueling aircraft in Iraqi airspace. Spokesman Ibrahim Zolfagari from Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters said the plane was shot down by air defenses over western Iraq, killing all crew members. And the U.S. State Department, or the U.S. Department of Defense, said the United States and Israel have struck over 15,000 targets in Iran since the war began on February 28. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the two countries are hitting more than 10,000 targets daily, adding that Friday would see the largest wave of strikes.
Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated. We said it would not be a fair fight, and it has not been. The combination of the world's two most powerful air forces is unprecedented and unbeatable. Between our air force and that of the Israelis, over 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's well over 1,000 a day. No other combination of countries in the world can do that.
And U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Iran's military capabilities have declined due to a clear destruction plan and decisive targets unseen by the world before, as he put it.
From day one, as our nation expects and the President demands, our warriors have fought with lethality, precision, and rapid innovation. In fact, today will be, yet again, the highest volume of strikes that America has put over the skies of Iran and Tehran. The number of sorties and number of bomber pulses, the highest yet, ramping up and only up.
U.S. President Donald Trump vowed on Friday to completely destroy Iran's regime 2 weeks after the beginning of joint strikes with Israel. Trump wrote on Truth Social that the U.S. has unmatched firepower, unlimited ammunition and time, and is planning to destroy the regime militarily, economically, and otherwise. The U.S. site Axios, citing 3 G7 officials, reported that President Donald Trump told allies Iran is close to surrendering. Trump called Iran a cancer threatening everyone, while praising the results of Operation Fury Epic. He said during a virtual Wednesday meeting that no one knows who the current Iranian leader is, so surrendering cannot be formally declared. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai stressed Iran's right to self-defense against what he called illegal and brutal attack by the U.S. and the Zionist entity. Baghai added that Iran's political system based on identity, history, and popular will is stable and capable, citing the swift selection of the supreme leader as evidence.
The will of the people, I think, was very telling. What we are doing right now is just defending our dignity, our sovereignty against this unlawful, brutal attack. I think those who are used to just call both sides on an equal footing and do not distinguish between the victim and the aggressors should really take a responsible position. They have to call a spade a spade. They have to address the aggressors. They have to make them accountable for the brutal war they have launched, not only against Iran, but also against the whole region. The instability, the insecurity of the region is the direct result of the United States and Israel violation of the UN Charter.
Baghai added that Tehran has never rejected diplomacy, noting that this is the second U.S. attack on Iran in 9 months during ongoing negotiations.
For the time being, I think we are focused, we are concentrated on using all our capabilities and capacities to defend Iran against this cruel war. And please do not forget the fact that we were in the middle of negotiations. We never rejected diplomacy. This was the second time during the past 9 months that Iran came under this attack by the United States while we were negotiating. Iran has proved its good faith, its good intention, its seriousness in diplomacy, but now is a time of war, a war that is imposed on Iran, and the whole system, the whole population are united to defend Iran.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said officials will follow the guidance of Mujtaba Khamenei. He added Friday that the Supreme Leader's message clarified the country's path and that overcoming the crisis is possible with the Iranian people's cooperation.
The message delivered yesterday by leader Mujtaba Khamenei clearly outlined and defined the course of the country's future at this critical stage. The country's officials will abide by the leader's message and guidance. Overcoming the crisis is possible and achievable through cooperation with our people, and the government will not introduce any policy, whether in governing the country or in international relations, without coordination with the leader. My government's priority is to strengthen the readiness of our armed forces for comprehensive defense and to organize the affairs of our people.
Saudi Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Turki al-Maliki announced the interception and destruction of 28 drones that entered Saudi Arabia's airspace. Al-Maliki said the drones were shot down across multiple areas, 14 in the eastern region, 7 in the eastern and central regions, 3 in Al-Kharj, 3 between Al-Kharj and the MT quarter, and 1 near the embassy district in Riyadh. And U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that the U.S. forces had destroyed Iranian naval and air forces, saying that nothing is left of Tehran. Trump added that Iran received on Friday the most powerful attacks since the war started. And the Oman news agency reported that 2 people were killed after a drone fell in northern Oman. Authorities said 2 drones crashed in Suhar, one in the Al-Ohi industrial area, killing 2 foreign workers and causing injuries, and another in an open area with no casualties. Investigations are still ongoing. Turkey's Ministry of Defense said NATO air defenses in the eastern Mediterranean intercepted the 3rd ballistic missile fired from Iran toward Turkey, demanding explanations from Tehran. A Reuters witness reported explosions overnight near Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey, home to U.S. and other forces, with Anadolu agency noting sirens sounded early Friday. Iran's permanent representative to the United Nations, Amir Saeed Iravani, called the U.S. and Israel's actions an illegal and unjust war against a responsible NPT member state. Speaking after a UN Security Council meeting on nuclear non-proliferation Thursday, Iravani accused Washington of destabilizing the Strait of Hormuz and the Middle East, while asserting Iran's right to freedom of navigation and self-defense under the UN Charter and international law.
As long as the Council fails to discharge its duties, Iran has no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under UN Charter and international law. Iran fully respects and remains committed to the principles of freedom of navigation under the law of the sea. However, the current situation in the region, including in the Strait of Hormuz, is not the result of Iran's lawful exercise of its right of self-defense. Rather, it is the direct consequence of the destabilizing actions of the United States in launching aggression against Iran and undermining regional security.
Even if the war in Iran has entered its 2nd week, thousands have gathered in central Tehran for Al-Quds Day, showing support for Palestine. This comes as the scope of the war is expanding to include countries across the region, amid fears that the conflict could escalate into a longer war. Nabil Khazini has more details.
Even as the war has entered its second week, they came to the center of Tehran. Each year on the exact same day, Al-Quds Day, they gather here to show support to Palestine. But this time it was different. It is a defiance of the moment, a moment of war. That was clearly evident just above their heads. Explosions in the sky of the Iranian capital as shelling intensifies on Iran and around the Middle East.
People are not afraid of these attacks. As you can see, people have come out in this rain. Under these hardships, we will not back down in any way.
And hundreds of kilometers away in Al-Quds, that same defiance was unmistakable, despite the closure of the Al-Aqsa Mosque by the occupation authorities, an attempt to prevent worshippers from entering during the sacred month of Ramadan, something unseen for 60 years. Faithful Muslims gathered outside its gates. On the streets, they prayed, their presence a powerful symbol of resistance and a quiet but resolute stand against the occupation.
What is the purpose of closing the mosque and preventing us from praying, particularly in Ramadan? It's a blessed month, a month of worship, a month of fasting, a month of obedience to God. What does preventing people from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque have to do with the war?
From the Gulf to Lebanon, Iraq and beyond, the flames of war are spreading across the region, raising urgent questions. When will this conflict end, and who holds the power to contain it? The answers are far from simple. Tehran has clearly understood that the escalating US and Zionist strikes are designed to weaken its strategic capabilities, while Washington's stated goal remains to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Iranian authorities have vowed a response described as decisive and destructive against any attacks on the country's energy infrastructure or key ports. On the ground, the situation is far more complex than political statements suggest. Rising oil prices, regional instability, and the risk of further escalation indicate that the conflict is entering a prolonged phase of attrition, with consequences that could reverberate well beyond Iran's borders.
U.S. Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane acknowledged the difficulty of safely escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz amid military operations against Iran. Kane said on Friday that the strait is tactically complex and Washington wants to ensure any actions align with its goals in the Middle East conflict.
We've made progress, but Iran still has the capability to harm friendly forces in commercial shipping. And our work on this effort continues. But I want to make something clear. The only thing preventing commercial traffic and flow through the straits right now, which there is some through the straits, is Iran. They are the belligerents here holding the straits closed, although there is some traffic moving through there. We've made it a priority to target Iran's mine-laying enterprise, their mine layers, the naval bases and depots, in addition to the missiles that could influence the straits. And CENTCOM continues to attack those efforts.
The European Commission said the International Energy Agency requested an assessment of the impact of releasing 400 million barrels from strategic reserves on medium-term supply security. The EU made the request after a European Oil Coordination Group meeting on Thursday, where member states said they currently see no threat to the bloc's oil supply. The United States issued a 30-day exemption allowing countries to buy Russian oil and petroleum products subject to sanctions, in a move Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called an effort to stabilize energy markets. Bessent said on X that the measure is carefully limited and short-term, providing no major financial gain to Moscow, following oil prices surpassing $100 per barrel. The exemption, effective March 12 to April 11, permits delivery and sale of sanctioned Russian crude and products. And Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said it is in Russia and that the U.S. interest to stabilize energy markets. He added Friday that Russia views the U.S. decision to ease sanctions on Russian oil as an attempt by Washington to stabilize global energy markets.
In this case, we see the United States taking action in an attempt to stabilize energy markets. In this regard, our interests align. We heard U.S. representatives state that this exception is being made for oil already loaded before March 12, but they also stated that the U.S. has no further plans to lift any oil sanctions against the Russian Federation. Therefore, at the current situation, our interests do indeed align. That's how we view it.
And Spanish Energy Minister Teresa Ribera described the U.S. easing of some Russian oil sanctions as a major shift from EU expectations, stressing that Europe will continue its own sanctions plan. Ribera added Friday that any price cap measures must consider the European context, and said responses would adapt to developments, hoping to reduce escalation and regional tensions.
Regarding U.S. policy, it is indeed a radical departure from what was expected from the European Union. It is somewhat surprising in this context, but we will remain firm. We have our own sanctions package, and we will, of course, continue to follow our plan at the European level. Depending on how the situation escalates, and based on the context in which we find ourselves at any given moment, this response, this package of measures, and this action plan may be expanded. But what we also hope for is de-escalation and a reduction in the intensity of the conflict.
The United Nations said the U.S. Zionist strikes on Iran and subsequent Iranian attacks on multiple countries have displaced millions and worsened an already dire humanitarian situation. Spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric reported that over 4.1 million people were internally displaced in Afghanistan, Iran, Lebanon, and Pakistan, while about 117,000 fled across borders. And the Lebanese Ministry of Health reported that Israeli attacks since March the 2nd have killed 773 people and injured 1,933. Among the dead are 103 children and 62 women. On Friday alone, 86 were killed and 159 injured. And since early March, Israeli strikes on Lebanon have killed and wounded hundreds, while ground incursions in southern Lebanon and forced evacuations have caused mass displacement and a severe humanitarian crisis. Osama Ayadi has more details.
The Zionist military invasion in Lebanon has intensified since March the 2nd, with expanded evacuation orders, continued airstrikes and ground incursions into Lebanese territory. Strikes have targeted southern and eastern regions, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and recently areas closer to the capital center. International aid organizations report that evacuation warnings have affected between 10 and 20% of Lebanon's territory, prompting a major displacement crisis. More than 800,000 people have been forced from their homes, making it one of the largest internal displacements in the country's modern history.
Israeli evacuation orders for southern Lebanon and parts of Beirut now cover approximately 1,470 square kilometers, equivalent to 14% of the country's area. Israeli mass evacuation orders have expanded to include vast geographical areas, often requiring immediate relocation, creating a state of panic and fear in local communities, who are apprehensive that strikes are imminent, even when they are not.
Around 600 shelters have been set up across Lebanon, but most are nearly full. The UNHCR says occupancy has exceeded 90%, leaving many families without shelter and forcing some to sleep on the streets or makeshift tents. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, has also recorded Zionist ground incursions reaching up to 7 kilometers into Lebanese territory, along with roadblocks and restrictions on civilian movement.
All of Lebanon is now in grave danger. South of Baitani, the Nubian settlements are empty of their inhabitants. South of Baitani, if we survive, I thought there were 100,000 Lebanese citizens. The danger is imminent.
Observers say the escalation is closely tied to broader regional tensions involving Iran, the United States, and the entity, raising fears that Lebanon could once again become a central arena in a wider regional conflict.
And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres arrived in Beirut on Friday as part of a solidarity visit to Lebanon, where the war with the Zionist entity since March 2nd has killed over 700 people, according to official figures. Guterres said on X platform that the Lebanese people did not choose this war and stressed that he and the United Nations are committed to pursuing a peaceful future for Lebanon and the region. The end of our program. Thank you for watching and catch you in our special program in a few moments.